Assembly meeting this afternoon. Speakers include British Foreign Minister Robin Cook. Washington Journal continues.
As Matt Drudge and Michael Kinsley at the table,
God,
but say
he's expecting fireworks.
Fireworks. I guess I'll start by just asking the two of you, what's new?
What's new?
You go first.
Well, I mean, I guess in terms of the paper today, the story about my old colleague Pat Buchanan says becomes the one to beat in the Reform Party contest is pretty hilarious. What do you think about this, Matt? Lorana, what's her name? Lorana Falani?
Lenora
Rushi.
Yeah.
Lenora Falani.
Lenora Falani is backing him. Pat Choate is backing him, who used to be considered something of a left-winger. And it's a sign of the odd reshuffling of American politics.
Do you like the fact that he was going to do the Reform Party thing?
Oh, I love it. Anything to shake this boring system up. You know, Joe Klein, you've got the Newsweek. I didn't get a copy of the Newsweek, but Klein's got the story about these boring candidates. And boy, he couldn't be more right.
I think is it in Newsweek or is it in the New Yorker? He writes for.
It's one of the fancies.
Yeah, I think it's the New Yorker. Yeah, but is the news media wants Pat Buchanan in this because it's a boring campaign, or because it will be a more interesting race or more substantive race?
Because it's a boring campaign. I'm reporting this morning that George Bush is refusing to release his medical records, and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal are both about to make this public and about to go public with their claim that he better release these. This is a tradition in this country. At least us reporters will ask. He has, of course, the right not to. His father did. Lee Atwater did. Reagan said it's important that we know who's going to be elected president and their medical background. So,
what do you think?
I don't know, but this is what we're left to talking about. There's no other interesting aspect. This Washington Times story this morning, the detailed, profound agenda for U.S. by the governor of Texas.
Hey, what do you think about that, Matt? Isn't it up to us to decide whether it's profound? He says he has a profound agenda.
Well, the line that caught me, this Ralph Hallow, was when he turned to Mindy Tucker, who's one of the press flacks down there, and he says, are my answers too long? I'm filibustering the man. Bush has such trouble with the press. This hasn't surfaced yet. My personal experience with him on these small stories like this medical records thing is there's no clear answer to this stuff. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of filibustering on a lot of aspects. So watch this. I think this is where it's going. You're going to start to see a guy who is uncomfortable with the press.
Do you think he'll make it through all this, Mr. Kinsley?
Well, so many Republicans are in a position I guess desperation might be putting it a little strongly. I've been thinking, boy, it's really outrageous that they're all rallying around George Bush, the Christian right, when they don't, among others, when they don't know anything about him. Then I was thinking back to myself in '92, and it had been years since there had been a Democratic president. And I think I even wrote, and I certainly thought, my position is I'm for Clinton. Don't tell me anything about him.
You didn't want to know.
Yeah, and I think that's the position of a lot of Republicans about Bush today. And I really don't blame them. He seems to be a winner. He seems to be a good politician. And they want a winner. And they don't care.
There's a piece in Newsweek about George Bush, the president, and it says, in ways public and private, he is an active hand on deck of his son's presidential campaign. Less than a captain, to be sure, but far more than a doty kibitzer. His fundraising network primed the campaign's powerful money pump. He peppers headquarters in Austin with email. The Bush family has its own private domain name and server. He expects to be fed a constant diet of juicy campaign trail gossip. He and his son talk often, especially when questions are raised about W's past. Quote, I know exactly what he's doing, Bush the elder said on Fox TV last week. He meant it literally. I'm there with him. I feel it. I can feel it, he says. What do you think?
Just what I said. I think immediately I'm seeing warning signs. When you have a simple sit-down interview in Austin with the Washington Times, which would be a friendly paper.
Yeah, I would hope so.
And he's saying, I'm filibustering the man.
Yeah.
There's just something not quite right here, and I don't know what it is, because I disagree with you. I think we should know who our candidates are. I do want to know who I'm voting for.
I do, too.
You maybe not with Clinton, you didn't care, but this time around, I do, personally, so I'm going to work as hard as I can as an independent reporter or gossip columnist, you would call me, to find the goods.
Here is the full-page interview in today's Washington Times. Ralph Hallow did it in Austin. It was a one-hour discussion, and you'll see it on your screen, hopefully, right now. Let's go to St. Petersburg, Florida. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Drudge, this is from St. Pete. I want to thank you for your good work. I have been following the Waco story in the weekly edition of the Washington Times, and I've got some personal interests in the gun control issue as well. A friend of mine advised me that you were on, I guess I don't know if I can say the Fox News network the other night, regarding the automatic weapons fire and the possibility that Delta was involved in that. I was wondering if you can give me anything to follow up on that with.
Well, there's a story this morning, beauty of the internet. Here we are, 4 a.m. in Arizona. Arizona Republic has a front pager on the lawyer. His name is Hardy, and he's been the one doing all the Freedom of Information Acts that has really embarrassed the FBI and the Justice Department. Now, he is claiming in this interview that he doesn't think Janet Reno's to blame or Louis Freeh. He says it's the underlings. I believe subordinates of theirs did, and the people who were on the scene certainly did, meaning a cover-up, meaning possible shootings by military at the scene. So I've been following this. I know it's fashionable in Washington to say, oh, Danforth, let him do his job. But I'm uncomfortable with Reno appointing someone who's investigating Reno.
Well, Matt, you know, there was this thing called the Independent Counsel Law, which I was for and remained for, and all the Republicans and most of the Democrats decided it was a bad thing. And it seems to me that your logic is impeccable. When something like this comes along, it's in the interest of the administration itself, it seems to me, to be able to say, if we've appointed someone independent, and if they get cleared, it has more credibility. And the counter-argument was you can appoint someone who's independent. And certainly that process, that's what this Danforth appointment is. And here you are being skeptical about it.
Let's go to Bowling Green, Kentucky. Good morning. Hello?
Bowling Green, Kentucky.
You're on.
Yeah, this is from Matt Drudge. I want to tee off on him. I look at you, sir, and I think of you as a little miniature Rush Limbaugh, another racist, prejudiced bigot. I'm a Democrat. I get sick and tired of the conservatives saying liberal Democrat this, liberal Democrat that. Well, I'm a constitutional moderate Democrat. I believe the Constitution will solve our problems, not liberalism, conservatism. Conservatives are racist, prejudiced bigots. They're hypocrites. They're separatists, divisionists. Liberals are a bunch of slack-jawed, self-righteous, arrogant, snobby, stick-up intellectual snobs. I think you act like your little father, Rush Limbaugh. You're a racist, prejudiced bigot.
Got the point, sir. Yeah, we've had this before. He calls, and he always goes through this litany.
Okay, I'm Jewish. Went to school at Blair High School up the road here, 65% minority. I live in Hollywood as a conservative. That makes me a minority of the most severe degree. I don't know where the bigotry comes in. I challenge you to point out anything I've written that's bigoted. So I just think you're just throwing things around. I'll be happy to play some ball, but I just don't buy it.
Michael Kinsley, you were in Seattle most of the time?
Practically all the time.
What brings you to Washington?
There's a conference of libel lawyers in Crystal City, which is right across the river. And our libel lawyer, who at Slate, he's not full-time for us, obviously. He's a Microsoft staff attorney, is active in this organization. And he's a very good lawyer and been very good to us. And he asked me to be on a panel on this, and I said yes.
Next call's from Missouri. What's the name of your town? Felton?
No, this is Belton.
Belton. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, we're going to liven things up here this morning. On George Bush and his medical records thing, the reason he doesn't want them shown, he already admitted to about a year ago, in a dinner for his mom and dad that he was a cocaine and alcohol abuser, and he quit both of them at the same time. And that's what he praises his mom for, and how it's so easy for her to just say no. Also,
Caller, how do you know that he admitted this in was it a private dinner?
No, it was a big Republican dinner in appreciation of George and Betty Bush.
And he admitted this.
Barbara Bush.
Well, wait, hold on. He admitted publicly that he had been a cocaine user?
Yes, he was on TV. This was before, it was on your show, C-SPAN here, the way you replay them the next day and so on down the line, is when I heard it. And it was before the Republicans ever started looking at him for president.
Do you have any idea what year this was?
Last year.
Last year.
Yes, before they ever started looking for him for president. And he was up there. It was an appreciation dinner for a Republican appreciation dinner thing where they have people up there and like this. And I listened to it because I wanted to hear somebody appreciating somebody besides Reagan, for heaven's sake, in the Republican Party.
All right, let you go. I haven't seen that clip. Maybe have to go back and look at it. You think that there is such a thing?
I think if you went back, maybe I'm wrong, that you would find that he spoke in general terms of having had a reckless youth, which ended when his mother put him in touch with Billy Graham, and that's a story he's told several times. And I'd be amazed if there was a specific reference to cocaine there.
Well, I've seen a lot of weird things in the middle of the night on C-SPAN, but I don't think I saw this.
Green Bay, Wisconsin, good morning.
Good morning. I have a question for Mr. Kinsley. You seem to have ignored what I consider, and many people consider, the massive corruption of Mr. Clinton's administration. There seems to be corruption on every level, the paying of the bonuses to the people who testified in his behalf. If a Republican president did the kind of things that Mr. Clinton has gotten away with, like not giving us his medical records, would you scream and yell and complain, or would you just be quiet? Thank you.
My impression is that Clinton has revealed his medical records. Isn't that right?
Not the full, no. No, they claim privacy. They had quite a bit of information pour out the second campaign, but no, there was still no release of his full medical records. And he's not the only one. Perot refused to do it. Dukakis was hedging at the time. I've been doing a lot of this because this issue is going to be hitting hard here soon.
Let me say in general, you always have to be careful of hypocrisy in when you're a commentator and applying the same standards to one side that you apply to the other. My impression is that, in fact, the Clinton administration is not dramatically more corrupt than earlier administrations, and that there's quite a lot of hypocrisy on the other side. People carrying on about things that they tolerated without a hint of complaint in early administrations. For example, this business about a friend buying him a house, or in essence buying him a house. Terry McAuliffe bought Clinton a house, and Reagan's pals bought him a house, Nixon's pals bought him a house, and there wasn't a peep of protest over those.
Well, there wasn't, but neither of the spouses were running for office, and Hillary Clinton is running for active office. She'll be an influential person if she makes it back to Washington. And I think for somebody who's involved in a lot of different aspects, as McAuliffe is, the guy who loaned the money, I think there is something going on here. As he admits, this would become illegal the second she's elected. So
the problem is Hillary shouldn't let him buy her a house.
That's the difference between Reagan and Nixon. Reagan was going out to the coast to watch the sunsets and to have a good time. Hillary is going up to New York to run for office, and somebody has bought her a house or loaned her money.
Well, it seems to me that that's not an important difference because Hillary hasn't been elected anyway yet, and the people of New York can decide whether they care about that sort of thing. The problem with the president in his second term is he's beyond a referendum by the people.
Michael Kinsley is originally from Detroit, Michigan. Matt Drudge is originally from Tacoma Park, Maryland, here in the suburbs. Michael Kinsley went to Harvard, Oxford, and Harvard Law School. Matt Drudge didn't.
That's okay.
Do you think there's a difference in the way you two look at the world? Because Matt Drudge did not go to college, and you went to all those big
How
schools.
about Matt Drudge grew up inside the Beltway, and I'm a Midwestern boy? You know, you can play these. We can play these reverse snob games, Brian, and a lot of politicians, a lot of journalists do them. I don't think any of it makes any difference. One of the good things about journalism is that credentials, like where you went to college, don't really matter as much as in other professions, because you're measured by what you produce, and you produce something every day. And
Mr. Drudge, what do you
Well,
think?
there is a difference. Michael, you do work for the world's richest man, one of the biggest corporations in the world. I don't.
That's true.
That does affect things. You can have a much better time than I can. You
Mr.
can hire
Drudge,
staff.
What, Rupert Murdoch is not one of the richest men in the world?
That's my TV show, not my website. And yes, you'll get me for ABC. That's the radio show. But
so you work for Disney and for News
and America Online. Yeah, I've got them all going. It's a conspiracy of success. But I do think...
Well, wait a minute. Why is yours a conspiracy of success and mine is just I'm working for some rich guy?
Because my website I am keeping totally free from any of these conglomerates. I've set it up so they can all just chew me up and spit me out, and I have a place to go home.
Now, if a politician you didn't care for said, well, I've got all these connections to these people, but I've got this website that's entirely separate from it, you'd laugh, Matt.
Well, I would, but I'm not in the position to make public policy or spend tax money. So,
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, good morning.
Good morning. I got two questions for Mr. Drudge. First question was, I've been looking every place for editorial board's discussion about Mr. McCullough, Terry McCullough, who has a case, as I understand it, before the joke of the Justice Department, where the outrage is about lending money, which my understanding is if you amortize that issue across the 7-year or the 30-year loan, that'd be $65,000 gift. My second question, Mr. Drudge, would be, why do you think it's necessary for Mr. Lamb to have to bring on a counterpoint to you when he doesn't do it for any of the other friends that he seems to have on every morning if there's a phone?
Both these gentlemen have been on by themselves. This was both of them ended up in town together, and we thought it would be fun.
Yeah, why do you have a counterpart to me, for that matter?
I agree with you, yes.
yeah, I've been on. Last time I was here, I was solo.
By yourself, yeah. Last time
you.
Michael Kinsley was on, he was on by himself.
Yeah.
I should state the Wall Street Journal did write an editorial, even though they're screaming in the wilderness half the time, because nobody's really listening, about this house sale, which will continue to be a problem. Again, it becomes illegal if she is elected, and they'll have to rewrite these papers.
I read that editorial, and I don't remember it making your Hillary point, and I do remember thinking at the time, boy, I have to go look up, did the Wall Street Journal peep about Reagan's house or about Nixon's house, and I'm sure they did not.
Yeah.
Phoenix, you're next.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
I'm calling. This is for Matt. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on your success. I'm a former classmate of yours at Northwood High School.
Ah.
I was a year behind you.
Did you know him then?
I didn't know him. He was a year above me, but I do remember him being active in things like drama and things like that. And so when I saw your website and I saw some magazine articles, I recognized you immediately, and I was just really pleasantly surprised. And I good for you. I don't agree with much of what you stand for, but I think it's nice to see that you've done well, and it's good. My comment is for you. When I tuned in this morning, and it's pretty early out here in Arizona, and I haven't even brought my paper in yet, but you were saying that you felt this was going to be a very boring campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just a comment. It's not a criticism. I think as one who was very instrumental in the breaking of the whole Monica Lewinsky Whitewater story, I think that has kind of created an environment in politics today where people are so afraid of the taint of scandal or corruption or, personal problems of any kind. I mean, I think we can look forward to many, or at least in the near future, many boring campaigns where we have to find the blandest, most unproblematic person that we can find to run in elections, and it's going to create ennui among the voters.
Well, I would say to that, there's still too much money coming into this town, attracting too many egos who want to spend this money for us all. So to that degree, we're always going to get a level of corruption in this town until that is resolved. And as far as Monica Lewinsky being the beginning of scandal in this country, boo-hoo. I mean, that was just another scandal in the history of scandal. This country was built on scandal and tabloid and the penny press and Hearst and all the others.
Now, we're going to go in about an hour and 10 minutes to Marion, Ohio for our 29th President Warren Harding feature. What do you think of Warren Harding, Mr. Kinsley?
God, at this hour in the morning, I don't have a view about Warren Harding.
You don't?
I'm sorry.
Why not?
You should have warned me.
Is it fair that they often in polls put him near the bottom of the 41?
Yeah, actually, there are people who he's regarded as he's mainly remembered for scandals, and I know there are people who say that that's unfair, that he's underrated, and but I'm not in a position to judge.
In his 2 years, 141 days, he appointed 4 people to the Supreme Court, including the Chief Justice, William Howard Taft. Port Washington, New York, on the conservative line. Go ahead, please.
Hi. My question is for Matt Drudge. First of all, I just want to say that I'm a 24-year-old moderate conservative, and I just happened to be channel surfing last week, and I happened to come across the 700 Club, I guess hosted by Pat Robertson, and he had they had some story about the Arkansas prison blood controversy.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, I was just wondering why I haven't heard much about it on the media.
Well, the book started as a fiction book. This is Blood Trail. It was introduced as fiction. Bad blood in Arkansas being sold to the Canadians, HIV. This is my problem with the story, is when you introduce something as fiction, it's hard then to turn it into a serious breaking news story. So I was stuck from the beginning. But yeah, people have been picking this stuff up. It's just not one of my personal favorites.
What do you two think of this story that was in Saturday's New York Times about Edmund Morris and the fact that he's put himself in this book on Ronald Reagan as a character who, kind of a fictional character?
I think you got to wait and see the book. You know, most of the people quoted in the piece in the Times and people I've heard talking about it say this is ridiculous, this is Random House should have refused to publish it and all that. Maybe it's a nutty thing, maybe it's a disaster, but maybe he's invented a new literary form, and he's straightforward about it. He's not pretending that it's well. Apparently, the book doesn't have in it a statement that he has fictionalized himself, but he's not exactly hiding it. And, you know, you should always be open to new literary forms.
Matt Drudge, what do you think of the fact that the New York Times got a copy of this book, weren't allowed to quote any of it, but took this fact out of it, put it on the front page of the Saturday paper?
New York Times attacking Reagan, what a surprise. And that is a preemptive strike. Now, if they've seen the book, can they say it's sympathetic or not sympathetic to Reagan? I mean, this is clearly, it's a sympathetic book to Reagan, and this is the campaign to discredit the book.
Matt,
at no point there is there any opinion up or down if it's sympathetic or not, even though they say they've seen it.
Clearly, this was an official leak that's part of the publicity campaign. So I don't think you can paint it as a part of a left-wing conspiracy against the book.
Well, actually what happened is the book was provided to a lot of publications for review purposes, but they couldn't quote anything until the date, September the 30th or whatever, and this was pulled out of that, the fact that they were able to see it but couldn't quote it.
Yeah, do you think the Random House really objects to a front-page article in the New York Times saying the book is controversial?
Well, you know, it's the era of politicians scoring with books, because John McCain next week is #3 on the New York Times list, and I think that's quite an accomplishment. And if you look at the list of Hillary books coming out, I did an item last night. You know, 6 books on Hillary coming out in the next 6 months. Gail Sheehy will be the first one out. Barbara Olson here in the city, I understand, is writing a book. Carl Bernstein's writing a Hillary book. Laura Ingraham is writing a Hillary book. Others are writing a Hillary book. I mean, this is getting so ridiculous that you're going to have so many different Hillary books lined up. So John McCain, you're going to have a few good weeks, but watch out, Hillary's coming.
Wise, Virginia next. Good morning on the moderate line.
Hello.
Hi.
This is for Mr. Drudge. I was going to ask him if he thought there would be an investigation of the savings loan with Mr. Bush, who's running for president, and also did he think it was okay that we would ruin Senator Eagleton's life? The Republicans, when he was going to run, they got into his private medical records and destroyed him.
What do you think?
The medical records is an issue. The savings and loan, of course, they'll be all over the place. You know, Jeff Girth at the New York Times, who broke Whitewater, is awfully quiet these days. I wonder what he's working on.
Armada, Michigan, next on the Liberal line for Michael Kinsley and Matt Drudge. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning.
I think that I'm an elderly man. It's good to see these two men together. I think the best thing I'm waiting for is Gore Vidal and William Buckley together. I think we had a great one in the 60s, didn't we? That would be nice to hear that.
They used to perform together.
What? Can you hear me all right?
They used to perform together, but I believe there was a famous lawsuit. One of them sued the other, or both sued each other, and I doubt they'll be performing together again.
Is Buckley's TV show folding? The firing line, it's ending this season?
I think it's ending this season, yes.
Caller, do you want to say something else?
Yes. Yes, anyway, I think that as far as Mr. Drudge is concerned and Mr. Kinsley, I think that, Mr. Drudge, didn't you retract the statement that you said about Sidney Blumenthal?
Yes, I did.
What is the status of all that? I assume you read this item in U.S. News?
Yeah, they're coming after me.
Let me read it so everybody knows what you're talking about. Even as his empire expands, Internet sleuth Matt Drudge has his hat in hand, taking a page out of the playbook from his favorite target, President Clinton. He has issued an appeal for donations to fund his estimated $350,000 legal bill stemming from a libel suit filed by Clinton aide Sidney Blumenthal. Is that true?
I don't know the legal bills, but yes, we are. I'm asking for help in fighting this White House advisor who is suing me.
Who's coming after you, do you think? This is Paul Bedard's column in U.S.
Who owns it, Zuckerman? I need to do a dotted line on that and see where that one leads. But no, I don't know. I'm making pretty good money right now. I just signed my own book deal.
It says you're going to rake in $1 million next year?
That's what Howard Kurtz reported. I don't know. Is Howard Kurtz pretty accurate?
Does it make you nervous, Michael Kinsley, to know that Matt Drudge is going to take in $1 million next year?
No, I think I don't care for a lot of what Matt writes, but I think his role as a journalistic entrepreneur is great, and it's one of the things that is great about the internet, that people like Matt can get started. Now, how much of that money comes from the website, and how much of it comes from...
About half from the website. So since I have a staff of 2, it's pretty much going to be a windfall. Unlike Solana, over 100 people. I don't know how many does Slate employ.
Far less than Salon.
Solana is just a fat operation out there. But
hey, the last time you were here, you didn't have any other employees.
Well, I've got to have some help. Got to have some help with this. I got to keep up.
He's moving down the bureaucratic trail there.
Yeah, hiring one other person. Not quite the Washington Post newsroom yet.
That person is stashed away where?
Stashed away out in Los Angeles.
Orange, Connecticut. You're next. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I have a question for Mr. Kinsley. Oh, even though he's a liberal, he's one of my favorite people.
Oh, thank you.
I would like to know why he would say that Clinton released his medical records when we all know that he didn't. And like everything else the Clintons do, they send out only what they want to be out. And that's a known fact.
I defer to people who seem to be more obsessed with this issue than I am.
Second question, caller. What is it?
The next question is for Mr. Drudge. They made such a big thing over asking George W. Bush about whether he ever used drugs. I would like to know, how come nobody ever asked Hillary Clinton whether she ever used drugs?
Mr. Drudge?
They will. I mean, it's coming for her, too. I mean, the interesting thing about this is they're all taking at the press club down the street saying, well, Clinton and Gore shouldn't take anything I'm doing personally. They're just the first 2 to come through this internet individual journalist type era. When anyone now who steps into public office is really going to be grilled, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Unlike George W. Bush, I think it's a good thing because it ensures we're not going to turn into a communist fascist state. If we can, as long as every citizen has a right to challenge people in power, I think we're going to be in good shape.
Michael Kinsley, how's the old slate doing?
Oh, we're doing quite well. Traffic's building, advertising's building.
What does that mean? Can you give us some concrete numbers?
Yeah, we according to this company called Mediametrics, which is trying to be the Nielsen of the web and is more or less the standard. We had a reach of 1.3 last month, which means 800 and some thousand visitors.
How about Matt Drudge?
And can I ask, do you subscribe to Mediametrics? Are you sending them a check?
I think Microsoft is a client. I'm not even sure about that.
Okay, I was just wondering, because this is a lot like Nielsen. If you don't, subscribe to the service, there may be consequences. That's the theory in the old days. I just wonder how Media Matrix, who is taking money from individuals and claiming to know what individual websites are, how they're performing, because they don't have my logs, yet they're giving me a number, and I don't know what it's based on.
No, it's based on, they're trying to do, I'm not an expert on this, but it's based on trying to do it like Nielsen. They put a box on your computer, not on your computer, but on a sample of a certain number of computers and extrapolate from that sample, just like Nielsen
So
does.
why is everyone so quick to make this into a TV model? We've got this great new invention. Newsweek has an interview with the guy who created the World Wide Web, or at least is claiming
Tim
to.
Berners-Lee.
And it's a fascinating little interview because he's not very happy with what he is seeing, and the commercialization and the lawsuits coming out from even linking. I believe your company has been involved in litigation for linking to other sites. He envisioned a web that was free, that was wild, that you could jump from all over different places on the spectrum. And I'm concerned with Madison Avenue trying to do what they did to the big three networks, and we see what's happened to current television. It's pathetic. And I'm afraid the Internet's going to turn into something like this if we follow this ratings, these codings, all these other things they want to do to this free medium.
Mobile, Alabama on the moderate line. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning to all of you.
Hi.
Morning.
I'd like to preface this by saying that Pat Buchanan's got about as much chance of being president as I have, and I got one other thing here. Mr. Kinsley, and I'm neither Christian, Jewish, Republican, or Democrat, and Mr. Kinsley started off this morning saying something about the right-wing Christians. When someone would say something about a left-wing Jewish, I've never heard that. Is that
I was referring to the Christian Coalition, which calls itself the Christian Coalition. I don't. First of all, I don't recall calling someone Christian as being a bad thing. And second of all, I was not labeling anybody as a Christian. I was referring to the Christian Coalition.
Del Mar, California on the Liberal line. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Mr. Drudge and Mr. Kinsley. In the spirit of Bill Bradley's appearance on ABC yesterday, I'd like to ask you both a couple of questions. 2 questions for each of you.
What do you mean by that for those who didn't see ABC yesterday?
Well, let him ask the questions. I think it'll become obvious.
It might become obvious, right?
Go.
Go ahead.
Mr. Drudge, there are stories that you are gay.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to respond?
Well, let's see. I haven't done cocaine. I am not.
Mr. Drudge.
I am. Hold on. I'm going to get to you because I know you're going to want to have more information on this. I am not gay. So what else do you have there? I know I saw the Sam Donaldson thing, and we're playing gotcha politics, and I'm not even a politician.
Can you ask my question, please? Mr. Drudge, are you gay?
I already answered that question.
Huh?
I already answered your question.
I didn't hear you because we were talking over each other. What did you say?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Have you done drugs?
I answered that question too. I haven't done cocaine.
What did you say? Because you answered the second question first, so we were talking over each other. In your desire to shut me off, to shut me down. Okay, so you've never taken any drug?
That is too broad of a question, and I'm not running for office.
Have you ever taken an illegal drug?
Not going to answer that question.
Why not?
Because I'm not running for office, and I don't want to spend people's tax money.
Caller, can you explain the connection to Sam Donaldson?
How did it work? I guess I guess one of them asked Bradley if he'd ever done illegal drugs. Bradley said, "Well, I smoke marijuana. How about you, Sam?" And then Bradley proceeded to go around the table and ask each one if they'd done drugs, and Cokie came up with some story about being pregnant, and of course George Will, who was actually taken aback, sort of mumbled something about some agent reference. Falstaff, right.
But he apparently
what does Falstaff have to do with not doing drugs?
I think he was referring to the beer, not to the Shakespearean character.
This guy sounds like he'd make a good internet reporter.
But what do you think of all this?
You have an internet website. It's c3f.com. I do a daily satire column called The Washington Pissed.
Caller, what do you think of all this?
.com, everybody, the Washington Post, or c3f.com/ntytoday.html.
Now, wait a minute. Am I going to get this kind of
is Kinsley going to get the question in?
Yeah, no.
I also did a parody of Slate 3 years ago called Stall, which you can check out.
Caller, can I ask you? Can I wait a minute? First of all, what is the actual web address? So we'll have, is it C3F or S?
F as in Frank.
Is it .com? Now, what is your name?
c3f.com. My name is HC.
HC?
Right.
You won't tell us what your full name is?
Hillary Clinton, I guess.
That's my nom de plume. I didn't hear that. What was that last comment?
Are you really calling from Del Mar?
Yeah. And I'm stoned too, guys. So cut me a little slack because.
Oh yeah. He's going to cancel out my vote. That's what scares me.
Is he still there? Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Why are you stoned?
Why am I stoned? Because it's. I enjoy it.
What do you get stoned on?
Well, the marijuana.
Mr. Kinsley, you've been awfully quiet on this. What would you like to say about this last caller and this last exchange?
Well, you want to ask me the question?
They let him go. They let him go. No. I draw a difference between people who are in public positions than people who aren't. And it's quite simple. If I've come to Washington and I want to represent and I want to spend the tax money that hardworking people are earning, I think you have a level of questioning that is different than if you're a reporter or are playing one on the internet.
Do you want to be asked the question?
Not especially, but I would answer it if someone wanted to ask me, because I basically agree with Matt that a politician is asking for power over us, whereas the only power a journalist has, or whatever Matt wishes to call himself, is the power of persuasion of his or her words. But I do think when something becomes such a focus like this, and a politician comes on a TV show like Cokie and Sam and gets pounded on it, it's fair enough to turn the tables.
Let's see if the callers want to ask you the question.
All
Let's
right.
go to Reading, Pennsylvania. You're next.
Good morning, Brian. You're the best.
Thanks.
No, I'm not interested in either knowing if either of these gentlemen used cocaine. I do have a question. I'd like to go back to the question about the house being bought for Hillary Clinton, and the reference to Ronald Reagan and his friends buying a house for him. Did any of these friends have any issues pending before his administration at the time?
I don't remember, but they certainly were people who enjoyed their association with the president, and I believe some of them had issues before the government. They were all businessmen with complicated business interests, and I have no doubt whatsoever that in a parallel situation, the people who are criticizing Clinton would have given Reagan a pass.
Okemos, Michigan, you're next.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I really love C-SPAN.
Welcome.
My question is concerning I saw last night on your 2000, C-SPAN 2000, Dan Quayle, Alan Keyes, Bill Bradley. Why do you suppose that Dan Quayle doesn't get any more coverage? Because it seems to me like he seems to come across very intelligent when it comes to foreign policy, and when you see him answering questions, he comes across as really knowing his stuff.
Mr. Drudge?
I think he does get plenty of coverage. Every time I turn on Chris Matthews' Hardball, I see Dan Quayle, for instance. I think he has gotten quite a bit of coverage.
Does Chris Matthews put him on more than others?
I think he does. I think he does. And Chris Matthews, by the way, has pulled ahead of Geraldo in the ratings in the recent quarter, so it's kind of interesting.
Very exciting.
That's a fun race.
What did you say, Mr. Kennedy?
I said it's very exciting.
What is?
That Chris Matthews has pulled ahead of Geraldo.
Why is that exciting?
I was teasing that. He takes these things so seriously. You were just complaining about the ratings being suspicious, Matt, and now you're citing them.
Well, I cite them because they're, again, I'm not so sure television is a flawed measurement, but I am convinced the internet media matrix is flawed simply because you don't have access to people's logs. So.
We have Detroit native Michael Kinsley with us. Actually, there's a smaller community, isn't there, than Detroit that you lived in?
I grew up in Detroit and then the suburb Birmingham.
And Tacoma Park, Maryland native Matt Drudge at our table, although these gentlemen live on the West Coast now. Before I grab a call, what's the significant difference of looking at the world from Hollywood than from looking at it from Washington?
There isn't any. You know, you can be wherever you want to be right now and cover the world. All you need is an internet connection and a modem. So that's what I do. My big new obsession is the British press, and I follow that quite closely from Hollywood. So it's just nice weather. The West Coast has, you know, a greater time zone advantage for the stuff I do. Plus, they leave me alone in Hollywood. It's only when I come to Washington do I get my behind kicked.
Mr. Kinsley, the difference between looking at the world from Seattle and here in Washington?
Well, in terms of putting out a publication like Slate, it's actually a bit of a challenge to, you're not only outside the Beltway and the buzz here, but you're inside a different Beltway, which is the world of cyberspace and the internet, and there's buzz of an entirely different sort, which tends to block out the political buzz. But the main difference in terms of public attitudes is not so much different political views as politics just isn't as important.
Long Island, on the Liberal line, good morning.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. First, thanks for C-SPAN. I think it's great. I think cable has missed a tremendous opportunity to be something more than it has become in general, but I think your show is really a jewel in the morass. But I have a question for Mr. Kingsley, and then I'll hang up and wait for his reply. Maybe it's just me. I consider myself, you know, a moderate liberal, but it seems like when I was growing up, in regards to politics, we've always been taught, I remember in school, that, you know, and when you're in a presidential campaign or other campaign, you run a good campaign, you raise the issues, you challenge your opponent, but when it's over, you know, you unite, you join together for the good of the country. That's why they call it the loyal opposition. But it seems like, I don't know, the atmosphere has changed. It seems like, maybe it's me, but it seems like the Republicans from day one of Clinton's election have engaged in a war. You know, it's like they don't want to unite and get behind programs. It seems their primary purpose is to criticize and bash and just attack. It's like an enemy within the country, a permanent, you know, fixture. I'd just like to get your comment on that. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure the majority of viewers disagree with you and will disagree with me when I say this, but I think you're right that the level of hostility to Clinton from the very beginning has been far in excess of anything that would be justified and anything that is really traditional. And certainly the level of hostility, especially given the fact that he's hardly an extreme left-winger, I think that the Republicans felt in 92 that after 12 years of Republicans, there would never be a Democratic president again, and that history had been stolen from them, and that they've been in a frenzy ever since. And as I say, I'm sure that's not a majority view of the viewers of this show, but it is what I think.
Now, the Jack Germán Wood cover column today in the Baltimore Sun says, now GOP may be party that's out of touch with nation. Mr. Drudge?
Well, see, it is starting. That's real nice and orderly and civil. I mean, Mike Kinsley, I cannot believe you would say what's happened to Clinton is unprecedented and unwarranted and not traditional. We have a great tradition in this country of tearing down our leaders. We do.
Look,
Go back to Thomas Jefferson and all that whole era when the press was vicious, much more so than it is now with this kind of innuendo and broader attacks. Then it was personal, and with Clinton it has been personal because I think he has caused quite a bit of commotion with his personal situations.
In 1929, Albert Fall, who was the Secretary of the Interior, was convicted and sent to jail because of the Teapot Dome scandal. He was the first cabinet officer in the country to be convicted, and he was in the cabinet originally of Warren Harding. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, next. Go ahead, please.
Thanks so much. I hope that I can get this out. You give me time. Good morning to all of you. Matt, this is for you especially. You're doing a wonderful job. Now, here's my question. I have a real concern about this. Clinton is very destructive. Most people will admit to that. And you can hardly ever believe what he has to say. But there are two things he said that are very prophetic. One is yet to come. The other is in process. And it's this. Shortly after he took office, he invited a group of homosexuals to his office and stated to them, I have a vision, and you're a part of it. And you can see actually what's happening. They're making great strides in every facet of our life. The other thing that concerns me is this. He issued a presidential decision directive similar to, you know, the executive order with this Y2K thing, where he has plans for martial law, relocation of the population. Here's my concern. The other thing he said I would almost put money on, when Senator Ashcroft said to him, Mr. President, step down, that's the only time I ever saw him look directly into the camera, and he said, never. Now, there's talk about the fact that he intends to stay in office. I'd very much appreciate your comments. I'm going to turn my set up and listen. Thank you, and best wishes to you, Matt, and C-SPAN. Thank you.
Mr. Kinsley, you were left out of that
Well, if the point is that Clinton may stay in office using martial law after his term expires, it's one thing I'm certainly not worried about. I don't know about you, Matt. And this is an example. This caller of the extreme hatred and paranoia about Clinton, which is sort of far, it puzzles me truly, because it's far in excess of anything that the facts would justify, or even political disagreement would justify. You know, people on the left are very unhappy with Clinton. They regard him as a moderate, and even the Republicans usually accuse him of stealing our issues. So it's not like he's you know, the way people used to hate FDR, because FDR really I mean, he saved the establishment, many people believe, but he was a threat to the establishment in terms of what he did, in terms of what he changed. Clinton is not even that, so it's really sort of a puzzle.
Nixon wasn't disliked?
Nixon was disliked.
How intensely compared to Clinton?
I would say similar, not quite as much, and in terms of the justification.
I'm talking even pre-Watergate.
Oh, I will tell you a story. The first political experience I had was my mother telling me in 1956 that she was voting for Stevenson because she couldn't stand Nixon. And sure, people hated Nixon. Hated is putting a little strongly.
I think it's accurate.
But once again, Nixon had a long history of justifying this, or certainly that explains it, that Clinton just doesn't.
Newburyport, Massachusetts. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I just really have a comment to make, and it's about the buying of the house situation. I'm not sure where I read this. It could have been in USA Today. It is my understanding that Mr. McAuliffe simply is guaranteeing it. He moved money from one bank to another. Right. That the payments will actually be made by the Clintons themselves, and that's a little different from the Reagan situation, where I understand they actually purchased the house for the Reagans, and that. Same case in the Nixon situation, the house was purchased for them. Mr. McAuliffe said he equated it to moving a CD from one bank to another. I'd liken it to my co-signing a loan for a family member, possibly. I would never hope to have to make the payments, but the money would be there if I had to use it.
Matt Drudge?
I have nothing more to add. I just think the last-minute pullout of Erskine Bowles was also interesting in this, because there is some risk. There is some risk.
I think the caller is letting Clinton off a little easy on this. He wouldn't have been able to afford the house if McAuliffe hadn't co-signed the loan. We'd all like some rich guy to come in and put the entire value of our mortgage in a bank. Even interest-bearing, which so that we could buy a bigger house, and so it certainly was a favor to Clinton by Terry McAuliffe, and it's the kind of thing which I wish in an ideal world didn't go on. But
Matt Drudge, what's the status of your lawsuit with Sidney Blumenthal?
I don't know. You'll have to ask the White House. I don't know where it is. It's been quiet at my end, and
have you been deposed?
No, I am not, and I look forward to some resolution on this, because I think it's grossly unfair to operate a lawsuit out of the White House, and I think that is what has happened, because Joe Lockhart has been involved in this lawsuit, as Susan Estridge revealed, and a few other things. So I'm stuck.
What do you mean he's been involved?
Lockhart has called press outlets to complain about coverage of my civil lawsuit. And according to Estridge. So I've been left with fighting this as a pedestrian against this big machine called the executive branch, and I look forward to some resolution. Hopefully it will be in court.
Now, what's the status of it right now? Have you been sued?
I'm currently being sued for $30 million by the White House. Yes, but I would caution...
Wait, by the White House, by this guy, Sidney Blumenthal, who works in the White House. So why do you keep saying you've been sued by the White House?
Because he asked for approval from the President of the United States and the Vice President before he filed it. And to me, if that was also said in a press conference. So
well,
the fact
someone
that they're putting their weight behind the lawsuit.
Wait a minute.
Are you for the White House putting their weight against civil litigation?
How are they putting their weight behind it?
By saying the President approved of the filing.
Wait a minute. Supposing I wanted to sue you for something, and I ask approval of my boss at Microsoft, can you then say Microsoft is suing you?
If I'm a competitor and Bill Gates said, go get him, why not?
He didn't. All you know is that he asked permission, and they said yes. Not that they said go get him, and that a question was asked at a press conference, and the press secretary answered it. That doesn't mean that the White House is behind the lawsuit.
You don't think a reporter who was first to mention the name Willie, Kathleen Willey, the first to mention the name Monica Lewinsky, and Bill Clinton isn't sitting there saying, go get him. I'd like to know this. I'd like to depose the President of the United States to see if he is...
now you're saying you have no evidence that the White House is behind it, but that if you were the White House, you would be behind it.
Joe Lockhart calling USA Today to criticize an editorial that was favorable to me. That is evidence,
what was he
Michael
criticizing
Kinsley.
it for?
The tone, saying it was too supportive. And Estridge, Susan Estridge, the former Dukakis campaign manager, came forward for that. So it's an interesting litigation. It's the first of its kind because the White House has never endorsed a civil litigation against an individual by a staffer of a White House.
He asked, I'm taking this, your version of this, I don't know the details. You say he asked whether he could, he asked permission, and they said yes. That doesn't mean they're behind it. It means they didn't stand in his way.
I think by announcing it through a White House press spokesman that approval has been given to sue Matt Drudge as he's out here exposing
Did they announce it, or did someone ask a question that they answered?
Lockhart could have said, I'll defer you to the legal department, as they do with everything else.
You're criticizing a press spokesman for answering a question honestly that he's been asked, and you're saying are you accusing whoever asked the question of being part of a setup?
Stay tuned. Is all I would say. I think I have the right to depose Joe Lockhart to ask him directly the details of his involvement in this lawsuit.
So basically, Matt, you have no evidence for any of this except stay tuned.
No. I have Joe Lockhart calling USA Today to criticize an editorial written in my favor. I do have that. They have admitted to that, so stop trying to ignore that.
Well, what?
New York City on the Liberal Line. Good morning.
Good morning. This question is for Mr. Drudge, and it's, don't you think that Governor Bush's possible drug use should be under greater scrutiny than probably the other candidates because of the very harsh drug laws that are currently in place in Texas?
Well, it's an issue. Jesse Jackson's raised it. Richard Dreyfuss this past week has raised it. I think if you're locking people up for youthful indiscretions, I think that could be tricky.
Suffolk, Virginia on the conservative line.
Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Hey.
My name is Matthew. I'm in the National Guard. I just want to make a comment today. I don't see how you can compare our country's problems or any similarity to what they were when Roosevelt or Benjamin Franklin was president. I think that, you know, the moral decay in our country has gotten to the point where people are, you know, closed-minded about a lot of issues concerning, you know, the fact that we're not, you know, everybody's looking at, you know, Clinton and what's going on with him, but they're not looking at, you know, the problems within our country as far as, you know, our moral problems. And I think that we need to seriously look into that if we're going to take care of our country and bring it out of the hole that it's in.
Mr. Kinsley, Mr. Drudge.
Well, you know, to some extent, looking at I mean, there are certain I won't say there are no moral problems in our country, but certainly the problems faced during the time of FDR were a lot worse. And moral problems are a luxury in a way that you can afford to look at and worry about when your economy is basically sound. And my own feeling is, and I think Matt Drudge may even agree with me, that I want the government to concern itself with the economic prosperity of this country, and I don't especially want the government to be concerning itself with moral problems, because I think that can lead to bad things, not good things.
Well, I wasn't talking about moral problems in this country. The caller didn't have it quite right. I was talking about a press that has always been very aggressive on leadership. You go back and read H.L. Mencken, you think he could work for the Baltimore Sun right now? I don't think so. They were very aggressive on people in power and those who wanted to come to Washington, those who want to raise taxes on the Hill and take even more money. And I think the least we can do is mock these people who want to do this kind of stuff. And that's what I do on the internet every day. Why? Because I can.
Speaking of H.L. Mencken, back in 1920, when President Harding was elected, he was the editor and publisher of the Marion, Ohio Star. James Cox was the owner and publisher of the Dayton Daily News, and the third-party candidate, Robert McCauley, the single tax party, was a reporter on the Philadelphia Inquirer. You thinking Mr. Kinsley running for president?
No, but I'm very interested in the single tax party. That was followers of Henry George, who is my favorite economist. And he was a 19th century American economist and politician who believed that land should be taxed very heavily in order to tax labor and capital very lightly. And he has a series of enthusiastic followers to this day.
Martin County, Florida, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Brian. Three things actually. Two questions and a compliment for you. I enjoy the old format, which is showing again this morning with two opposing points of view, or whatever you want to call it, on either side of the table. I miss it. I think it's much better than having one point of view which never gets rebutted. 2 points. Question or just a fact for Mr. Kinsley: if he wants to get onto the internet, go to some of the Canadian papers. The Ottawa paper and the Toronto paper have been all over this Arkansas blood deal. It's simply put, they were selling blood that was taken from the prisoners down there in Arkansas in Canada because they were unable to sell it in the United States. They had been banned from selling it in the United States because of the various problems with the AIDS viruses and hepatitis C and so forth and so on. And they did have an outlet in Canada. The second thing on the Clinton's housing deal, the big problem with it is, it's kind of hard to believe that the President of the United States can't get a mortgage, but that's the financial thing. But the deal is that the super jumbo mortgage they got comes through at about a point less than what a normal mortgage would have been if they'd have put their own money up.
Sure.
And ends up saving them from the thing I read in the paper, saving the Clintons about $60,000 a year.
Well, of course, you can get a good deal on a mortgage if someone's put money in a bank to guarantee it. But Reagan, I think, got a good deal on the rent he paid for that house bought by his friends. And, you can argue which one is a sweeter deal, to have your friends buy a house for you and rent it to you at a favorable rate, or someone putting money in a bank for a mortgage. But all I'm saying is there's a double standard in the people who are trying to make an issue out of it for Clinton, because nobody, including Democrats and liberals and Reagan haters and everybody else, even attempted to make an issue out of it when Reagan did it.
Mr. Drudge, back in 1920, when Warren Harding ran for the presidency, he was the first president to have a radio on the second floor of the White House, or anywhere in the White House. First president to speak on the radio. What do you think in history the internet will be on one of these presidents?
Liz Smith this morning has an interesting item. The Columbia Journalism Review, she's just getting this now. This is the July issue. Shows you Liz Smith is really on the ball. But
you just got it from her this morning.
No, I didn't. No, I'm just highlighting it. I got it when it came out. Did the top 10 media dates of the century. And you should see the list, the Columbia Journalism Review, or the agency French Press, actually, the world's oldest wire, listed the top 10 media events.
Marconi sends the first radio waves across the Atlantic in 1901. The first commercial broadcast airs in 1920. John Baird invents TV in 1926.
I think it's number 10 that Matt's
No, keep going.
Number 10, Matt Drudge airs Monica Gate on the internet in 1991. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought we'd save a little time there.
So Liz Smith goes, wow, and, you know, but I would say things can continually move. Radio to me is still a live medium. Radio in many respects is more important to me than television is. Just by its nature, I get more information from radio. It keeps my mind a lot more fresh than television does. So I think radio...
Except for C-SPAN.
Except for C-SPAN.
When are you, although we have a radio station here, so if you like radio, you can listen to it here and on the internet. When are you on ABC Radio?
Sunday nights. I was there this morning at 12 a.m. So we do 10 to midnight, coast to coast on Sunday, and having a ball with that. We're on over 100 stations, every state of the union, and
you take calls?
I'm just doing it in case the internet crashes and I can fall back on some career. I'm not as smart as Kinsley. I can't. Plus, they don't like me up in intellectual.
Fairhope, Alabama. You're next.
Yes, Mr. Drudge, I want to applaud your success as a gossip columnist, because I believe that is truly what you are. But you know, and your lack of education shows through with your lack of logic. The question is, I feel that it's important that we know about your drug use, just like we know about politicians, because you disseminate what some people call truth. And in like one of the earlier callers said that you were like Rush Limbaugh, and he was right in that it's entertainment or news, and people confuse what it is that you're giving us. And if people actually get what they call it is news from you, we have as much right to know whether you're truthful as we do about a politician being truthful.
Do you want to ask Mr. Kinsley about his drug use?
Mr. Kinsley, too. Anyone, and you, too, for that matter. I mean, how are we going to believe the press if their background is flawed?
Mr. Kinsley, he still didn't ask you, so you're off the hook.
Well, what is the press? I one day just set up a website. Sir, you can do the same thing. You can become a member of the press. You can report on me if you want. You can report on Brian Lamb or Kinsley if you want. This is the new dynamic that's shaping up quickly. So I don't know what the press is, and the level of trust I have is between me and my readers, which obviously it sounds like you're not one of them. And they come to me. I don't go to them.
Do you think we ought to be asked all those questions?
Well, should I ask you? You can ask me.
You ask me any question you want.
You go first.
Oh, you started all this.
All right.
No, a guy that was stoned started all this.
What did Bill Bradley ask yesterday?
Cocaine.
Yeah. Have you ever used cocaine?
No.
Have you ever used any other illegal drugs?
No.
All right.
But now, see, I'm a penny waste in the eyes of a lot of people out there. That's the other side of it.
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, people will respect you less because you.
Well, some people.
Well, that guy who called in, possibly.
The guy out there who's stoned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was perfectly forthright about it.
St. Louis, Missouri, you're next.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
Good. Welcome.
Brian, I have a question for Matt Drudge, and then I'd like a follow-up with a comment for Michael Kinsley. My question for Matt Drudge is, why does he think there's been a media blackout regarding the Clinton administration allowing the Red Communist Chinese Army to take over control of the Panama Canal? Plus, as Representative Dana Rohrabacher spoke on C-SPAN last week, that Clinton's former campaign manager in Florida, Simon Farrell, has allowed 140 Chinese immigrants to illegally come into the United States. From that point, somehow, I don't know exactly how he did it, and the only thing I ever heard about was over C-SPAN, and there hasn't been any discussion about it since. And
there was one AP cycle about the Panama Canal, which they denied a government backing. It's a Chinese nationalists, or it's a Chinese business that's doing and claiming not to have ties to the military. I think this Red Army March, October 1, celebrating with the 50th anniversary there in China, is going to be quite a stark reminder that they are not us, that globalism, a country to Strobe Talbot, isn't one nation with citizens of the world. I think there are different competing interests. They're communist. We're not. And I think this is going to become a stark reminder as we go.
Richmond, you're next.
Good morning, gentlemen. I would just like to make a couple comments, if I could, please.
For Mr. Kinsley, you don't have to say whether or not you're smoking marijuana, because from the way you're apologizing for Mr. Clinton, it's obvious, the answer is obvious. He belongs in an orange jumpsuit with a serial number on it, behind bars, where everybody else, you know, who breaks the law goes, except for the people in Washington. You know, they become heroes. And Mr. Drudge, I just wanted to say that I don't want to misquote what you said earlier, but you said something to the effect that we are safe from a communist and fascist state because the average man can hold people in office accountable, and I disagree with that. I don't think the people in Washington give a rat's patootie about the common man. All they care about is getting the money, getting the power, retiring, stealing as much as they can, and I don't really think they care about us at all, and we are heading for a communist and fascist state. And I appreciate this program, though, because I like the opportunity to call in, so I will just hang up and listen if you want to respond. If not, have a good day.
Mr. Kinsley?
Well, I mean, this program and C-SPAN in general are both perfect examples of how far we are from a communist or a fascist state, which couldn't conceivably go on. This would be among the first things a communist or fascist state would shut down.
Do you get any sense of, from an international basis on your slate, do you get any feedback around the world?
Oh yeah, we have one of our regular columns is called International Papers, which does actually what Matt was discussing earlier, goes and checks reports on the news. Every major newspaper in the world has a website now, and we have someone sitting in London surfing the web and covering what's going on in all the papers around the world. And we have about 15 to 20% of our readership, as best we can tell, is outside the United States.
And you can find Slate by going to the web and addressing it.
Thank you. www.slate.com, or skip the www, slate.com.
Is that small letter Slate?
Doesn't matter. S-L-A-T-E, small, large, any way you want to type it in.
And Mr. Drudge, your address?
DrudgeReport.com is the address. And we have something in common. I was hacked last week by these hackers who hacked the NAACP last night, too. So there's some kids out there, or whoever these people are, who are hitting all of us here. They haven't hit Slate yet?
Not that I know of.
United Lone Gunmen is their name, right? You have no idea who they are?
Oh, well, they're too wimpy. They won't show their face. I dared them on radio last night to hack me again, and they couldn't pull it off. So I think they're just, they're not as widespread.
And what does it mean exactly to hack you?
They deface your front page. They put up whatever they want to put up, and you have no control over the situation.
And people who come to your site
see there.
Are you going to put a firewall up, Mr. Drudge?
I've got a whole bunch of stuff up there. Are you? I mean, it was. I went on and was giggling when you got hacked, and then I got hacked, and it was not pretty.
Bel Air, Maryland. Good morning.
Hi, this is Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Michael Kinsley a question. I thought it was kind of odd. I'm in my mid-50s, and I've been watching politics, following it through the years. I got interested, through my grandparents. But I thought the arguments that were coming out of the conservative Republicans about our intervention or our police action in Kosovo were so similar to the arguments from liberal Democrats during the 60s about our intervention in Vietnam. And it seems like what was up is down, what was down is now up. And I just like to hear his comments.
Sure, there's been a reversal on any number of issues. America's role in the world is certainly one of them. Pat Buchanan, who was in favor of every intervention ever conceived a few years ago, is now against any intervention you could conceive of. The independent counsel we discussed is another one where there was a flip-flop. And I think what really irked me was not so much that people opposed the intervention in Kosovo, because I was for it, but I could see that was a difficult question, was when it turned out well, no one would give the administration credit for having been proven right, and that did irk me.
Mr. Drudge and Mr. Kinsley, the Wall Street Journal has a fourth section today, fourth or third section, fourth, I guess. 32 pages, and mainly the head, and it's a tremendous amount of writing in there. The title on this special telecommunications section is "The Internet Cuts the Cord, the Web at Last is Going Wireless, and a New Industry is Born." Will that make any difference?
Sure it will. Sure it will. It's going to be a rapid move to wireless, to satellite dishes, to antennas, all this other stuff. You know, I update the Drudge Report now from airports just by plugging it into the payphone, which is kind of fun. And I love the freedom of not having to be at home or in a hotel room to do it. So it's going to be absolutely wild in the next 10, 20 years. And this is why individual freedoms are so important to protect. There's a story in the New York Times this morning, which we should have led with, actually, because it affects both of us. This thing here.
Plan calls for self-policing of the Internet.
And who's making this plan?
Are we in favor of this self-policing, or we're against it?
I am, because I don't want the likes of you to stop me. So, or me to stop you. I mean, who is making a plan? Who is in charge of making plans about self-policing? Who gave them the authority to make this plan? This is what's so interesting about this. On and on it goes about what is a news website. They take an absolute hit at me, comparing me to a nude website and some other things.
Well, wait a minute. What's wrong with a nude website? If people want to do it, I mean, you can't say I want freedom for me, but not for them.
No, that's their point. But I am saying, who is drawing up plans for self-policing?
Well,
who are these people? This looks like a conglomeration, the Bertelsmann, the Germans.
Why should there be any plan?
There should. That's my point. How is it even getting to this stage that know-it-alls or people who own 10 million shares of stock get to make plans for the rest of us?
Mr. Kinsley, should the government have anything to say about the Internet?
Sure. I think as little as possible. But for example, I think that the people on the Internet who say we shouldn't be subject to the sales tax by states, which other forms of commerce are subject to, because we're the Internet and we're somehow special, I think that's very silly. Taxes should be as low as possible, but they should be fair. And if I'm going to buy a book from Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, there's no reason why I shouldn't have to pay a sales tax on that if I have to pay it when I buy it from my local bookstore. It's just...
I was going to say, Michael, you're breaking my heart. Here's a chance to start over. The tax code is so complicated, so confusing. It's virgin now. The second you have one sheet of paper and a tax on the Internet, you know it's going to turn into a whole pile.
Peterstown, West Virginia. Go ahead, please, from Michael Kinsley and Matt Drudge. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys this morning? I enjoy the conversation. I wanted to make one comment in regard to the upcoming election. I have to disagree with Matt here, because I think it's going to be a really interesting election, and it's going to grab the nation, because everyone on the right and everyone on the left knows that it's probably the first time in 70 years that the Republicans could possibly have total control of the government. So I think it's a big game. A football game would be a good analogy. I think it's going to be the game of the century, so to speak, or, like I said, the game since, or the biggest game since 1929. And my second, I just had a question. I wanted to direct this to Mr. Kinsley. I wanted his thoughts on the lawsuit. I think that David Horowitz has filed, or talking about filing, against Time Magazine for his article on black crime. Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard about that he's thinking of suing, although I actually heard most recently that he's decided not to sue. And I hope that's the case, just as I wish Sidney Blumenthal would drop his suit against Matt Drudge. I don't think that in the area of public discourse it helps to be suing people. And I think journalists and even pseudo-journalists, as Sidney Blumenthal and David Horowitz are both sort of pseudo-journalists, ought to be suing other people who are engaged in even vigorous public discussion.
Mr. Kinsley, how well do you know Sidney Blumenthal?
I got asked that by 2 callers last time I was on the show.
I asked it for a reason, because the reason I asked you is we don't hear from him at all. He doesn't go public. We don't hear speeches. He doesn't visit talk shows, and I wanted to know if he ever would do that. Do you think?
I've seen him very little since I moved to Seattle, but he and I worked together at the New Republic, and I know him. I'd say he's a friend of mine.
But do you know why he's not being public at all in this period?
I have no idea. It's probably a wise idea.
How well do you know him, Mr. Drudge?
I don't know him at all. I just, what does he work in the White House communications? Is he their communications person?
He's not.
I don't know what the role is. It's not been defined. And I just think it's curious for someone who talks to the press so much as he does that he never does actually show his face.
Mr. Drudge, do you have people that have called you since all this happened and say to you on the phone, just let me know how much you need, I'll help you? Because of their obvious dislike for the president?
Me directly, no. No, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened over at the Defense Fund.
Who runs your defense fund?
David Horowitz does, so we've got a small little circle here. I think the bottom line on this is I was one guy out in Hollywood typing up these stories. I really was. I live in a $600 a month apartment. When I reported the Kathleen Willey story that she was going to claim the president harassed her in the Oval Office, I really didn't have but $2,000 or $3,000 in the bank.
They haven't raised your rent, Matt?
No, they haven't.
Because you're living in an apartment that was lived in by Matt Drudge. I would think that would be more valuable.
Are you still living in that apartment?
I still am. I still am, and I'm still driving the same beat-up car. So,
but comes a time when that all should change, and you should be able to live according to your new wealth?
Probably not, because I'm taking small steps. And to me, getting into the internet was not about cash or money. This has all just been sort of an extra fringe. That is, I shouldn't complain about it, because and it also shows you this country is still wide open, that a little sprout like me could come along and make some serious money.
Any comment, Mr. Kinsley?
I agree. I just think that you're tending to your legend a bit too carefully.
No, I'm too busy reporting.
You think he should lighten up and spend a little of his money?
Yeah, either that or stop talking about how he was born in a log cabin and so on and so forth.
I'll move up to the Seattle Hills with you.
Strong. I can't even get it out. Strongsville, Ohio. Good morning.
Good morning, Brian. What a thrill for me to get through.
Welcome.
Especially with your two guests this morning. One of my favorites, of course, is Michael Kinsley. And Mr. Kinsley, I want to tell you that when I started getting on the Internet, one of the reasons that I got on was because I had read an article in Brill's Content where they interviewed 3 of the top syndicated columnists, and they said that they got the most accurate information from Slate.com.
Oh, well, God bless you, man.
And from Salon.com.
Oh, well.
I follow you both very, very closely.
She went and ruined it.
And Matt Drudge, I check in just to see what kind of trouble you're making. And what I wanted to talk to Mr. Kinsley about was an article that was in Slate magazine. It was last week, and we were so impressed with it because it related to something that my husband and I recognized immediately when all of the things came out about Monica Lewinsky. And that, and we're Presbyterians. And the article is Sins of the Tongue, and it was written by Deborah Sugar.
Right.
And it was Tuesday, September the 4th.
Right.
That it came out. And it's in reference to traditional morality, and it quotes theologians such as St. Thomas Aquinas. And the bottom line is that the greater sin and the greater crime is what Kenneth Starr did.
Thanks.
This was an article by a scholar of medieval literature who named Deborah Sugar. She's a professor at UCLA, who said that whether you agree with it or not, traditional Christian values, in terms of the ancient Christian writers, thought that forcing a person to talk about private sins and embarrassments was a worse sin than the private sins themselves. And she applied this logic to the Kenneth Starr, Bill Clinton situation.
If somebody goes on to Slate, give us some of the features.
Well, we have a feature called Today's Papers, which is a little bit like your show here. Someone spends all night surfing the web and gets faxes of the 5 national newspapers and summarizes them. We have the international papers. We have a column called The Week, The Spin, which tries very hard not to have any bias itself, but to talk about not only what the news is, but there's a particularly good column by Matt Drudge or a particularly bad column by Matt Drudge that makes such and such a point about it.
And your television show on Fox News Channel, when is it?
We get 6 airings over the weekend. Sunday at 9 is a good one, and Saturday at 7, all East Coast time. Is
it taped or is it live?
Well, we're live Saturday at 7, and we've been catching up to Cap Gang, your old stomping ground over at CNN. And it's great fun because, again, I didn't know that I'd be on TV, radio, or sitting next to Brian Lamb.
Oof. It's a week, that last one. Los Angeles, you're next. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Drudge. Good morning, Brian.
Morning.
I'm a KIV listener here at Los Angeles.
You're up early.
I need to know, you had a program about Sturrow Talbot. July 1992 Time magazine article, A Birth of a Nation. No, I mean Birth of a Global Nation. I would like for you to go back into that article, give us a perspective, and I would love to know what Eastern establishment lapdog like Mr. Kinsley would have to say about global having a global government in the near future.
Eastern establishment lapdog.
What am I supposed to say? No, I'm not. I was born in a log cabin like Matt in Tacoma Park, Maryland, inches from the nation's capital.
When you hear someone call you an Eastern establishment lapdog, what immediately comes to mind?
Nothing.
Mr. Drudge.
Well, I do want to comment on this Strobe Talbot quote because in 1992 in Time magazine, he was an essayist. Would write once a month or every other week?
No, he was the Washington bureau chief.
Strobe Talbot.
Yes.
Who's now #2 at State.
That's the man.
He wrote an essay, The Birth of a Global Nation, and I wish I had it in front of me because it really is stunning in retrospect at what's happening now, especially this morning with us landing over somewhere called East Timor. Here's one optimist reason for believing unity will prevail. In the future, there will be no nations. Citizens of the world will answer to one global authority. Countries are basically social temporary arrangements. What is this? Where is this coming from? Is he implementing this in current policy with these deals he's making? These are hot issues for me. And thank goodness I have a Nexus account so I can dig some of this truth up.
Well, you know, this is the problem with journalists getting into politics, and it's actually a problem for Pat Buchanan, too. And it would be a problem for you or for me if we ever got into politics, which is, as a journalist, you throw caution to the wind. Your job is to be as interesting and provocative as you can. And then as you get into the political arena, you have to be careful. And in fact, it's much better in the age of Nexus, where people can look up anything you've ever written, if you're a man like George W. Bush, who has no record to explore.
But that doesn't address if Talbot believes what he writes and is now implementing this theory that there'll be no nations, just one global authority.
Why don't you ask him?
He doesn't return my calls.
Let me ask the two of you, because we're soon going to Marion, Ohio, where the front porch campaign of Warren Harding was conducted in 1920, and I actually have a reenactment of one of the speeches there where some of the townspeople in Marion will be there this morning. But back in 1920 in the election, James Cox, and we talked about this earlier, he is the original owner of Cox Broadcasting, Cox Newspapers, which has a studio up on the 7th floor here. He got 9 million votes. Warren Harding got 16 million votes in the 1920 election. Eugene Debs got 919,000. And I bring that up because he was a socialist candidate, an Indiana fellow from Terre Haute, ran about 4, 5, 6 times for president back then. What do you see now? Because in the next election with Calvin Coolidge, Robert La Follette gets 4.8 million. What do you see now, the two of you, with Pat Buchanan running, the Reform Party, the Jesse Ventura thing? How's this all going to fit in? In neither case, by the way, back then would the independent votes have made a big difference because there was enough of a gap.
I think these third-party things, this is the Eastern establishment lapdog view, of course, but somehow or other they never really take off in this country.
Well, they obviously take off at one point. How has the Republican Party founded? I mean, if you find something in rebellion...
Right, that was the last time.
Okay, so maybe we're due.
Well, possibly, but it's...
You're saying we've stopped creating ourselves? We're in a rut? We've stopped reinventing America? Is this what you truly believe?
No, I think we've managed to reinvent America pretty well several times with the two parties we've got. I'm not saying I'm for this. I'm saying there are strong... If we haven't had a new party, a real successful new party since 1856, it's possible we'll have one tomorrow, or it's possible that it's going to take a lot longer.
Our guests coming up include Robert Farrell, who's an author, a historian, Melinda Gilpin, who's the site director of the Harding Home State Memorial, and Kenneth Hammontree, President Harding Portrayer, will be here. And if you've just joined us during this program of civility, one of our callers referred to Matt Drudge as a racist, prejudiced bigot, and to our guest here on my left, the Eastern Establishment lapdog, Michael Kinsley, as we go to Raleigh, North Carolina. Go ahead, please. You're on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hi there.
I was really surprised a few minutes ago when Brian answered the question about his drug use. And I was wondering from Mr. Drudge and Mr. Kinsley if they think each other and people like Mr. Lamb should answer questions like that, should have to answer questions like that. And Mr. Lamb, why did you? Are other questions of a personal nature, like have you ever had an affair or who you voted for in the last elections, are those up for grabs too?
Well, that's very interesting. See, you find yourself when you're asked these questions, if you answer them, then when does it stop? And the callers have seen through this all.
It's part of the problem that George W. faces because, you know, it's not as if he'd like to say my private life is off limits, except for the fact that he made a great point of I've always been faithful to my wife, I've never had an affair, and so then you say, well, if you're going to answer questions about that, why shouldn't you have to answer questions about your drug use, which seems to me to be a reasonable point. I basically agree with Matt that there's a difference between politicians and journalists. Nobody votes for a journalist. But I do think that when something like drugs becomes such a focal issue and you are asking others to answer the question, at a certain point you ought to answer it yourself.
I will say this, I've never asked that question, so I don't know why I answered you. I probably will
pay the price for my persuasive interview technique.
I will never answer you again on those kind of questions. How's that? No one still has asked you the question. You've got. We only have about 2 calls left here. Well, Mr. Drudge, you want to throw your 2 cents in on this?
No, I mean, Kinsley is a competitor. I don't think that's quite fair.
We're not competitors.
Well, sure we are. Anyone who has a website is a competitor of yours and mine. And I think there's a battle for eyeballs, and I'm not going to sit here and go probing you. I consider you to be a great reporter, journalist, and everything else. So I don't know why I answer these questions, because I consider myself part of this new muckraking digital type that will... that I do use my real name, unlike some people, even in this town, who are using phony names, and I do want to be...
Who's using a phony name in this town?
Well, I'm doing a book, Let the Future Begin, and I'm going to save a lot of the good ones for the book, because there are so many frauds who are operating under the guise of journalism. And it's going to be interesting to see who really is more interested in makeup and performance and hair over what it actually is being read through the teleprompter.
I thought you objected to people making a big deal about who's a journalist and who isn't.
Except for those who do make the big deal.
Wait, what do you care if someone cares about their hair?
Because it goes back to that your opening shot about hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is the best thing for going. It's the biggest meaty thing I could come up with to get more readers.
Rest in Virginia, and then one more call, and then we're out of here. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I've never gotten to speak to a self-made journalistic proctologist before, so it's kind of interesting. A couple of comments.
That's a very, very unfair way to describe Brian.
Well, that's right. Well, he used muckraking and digital, so I figured I'd throw that in. Listen, Brian, good morning. It's been a while out here since we've spoken. It's tough to get through these days. A couple of comments and a follow-up. I find it fascinating that the gun-toting, gun-worshipping Bible Belt West is basically the main scene for where we have this kind of carnage in high schools and religious classes coming from the area, where you would think that because of the kind of dialogue that they stress out that way, and self-control, and you would find this. And I'm just wondering what your guests may think of that. And I also find that the spin from the right on this as being a cultural breakdown is a far greater attack, an excuse to attack freedom of speech, and imply censorship on the film industry, literature, music, than being able to register handguns. And a quick follow-up, if I may.
Well, I'm real sorry about the follow-up, because we've got one more call and we've got to get out of here. Who wants to answer this?
Well, we actually ran a piece by Steve Chapman of the Chicago Tribune, who's been on your show, pointing out, whatever you care to make of it, that there is in fact a correlation between the places these shootouts, these mass shootouts take place, and religion, a positive correlation. That it's the more religious neighborhoods where these things tend to go on. Not that anyone is suggesting that religion causes them, but it's a way of tweaking the people who say we need more religious teaching and values.
Mr. Drudge?
I'll just real quick flash to the Bernie Weinrub, page 1, Wilshire Boulevard exclusive here. Stung by criticism of fall shows, TV networks add minority roles. They didn't pass legislation to add minority roles. It's public shame and it's public pressure. I wish this town would get that through their head. This is what we need more of. Private sector, public shame, as opposed to laws that are passing things. As far as George W. Bush wanting to raise the age limit for guns on age 21, it wouldn't have helped the Atlanta business shooter. It wouldn't have helped this thing in the church. I don't know why he wants to block people who can serve in the military and who are paying taxes from defending themselves at home.
Jeffersonton, Virginia, next.
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to say to Mike, I really miss you on Crossfire. It just hasn't been the same without you.
Oh, well, thank you. Check out Slate, please.
And secondly, I think that George W.'s drug use is just one of the minor slimy little skeletons roaming around in the Bush family closet. And I'm wondering how much attention Mr. Drudge is going to pay to all those other skeletons, especially the savings and loan one.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll be playing catch-up with you. I'm being criticized from a lot of my supporters who thought I was only going to cover Clinton until the day I die for at least reporting some stuff on Bush. And again, I have an exclusive this morning that Bush is refusing to release his medical records to reporters, and we may get one of the newspapers challenging him to do so shortly.
Do journalists call you working for these major publications when they can't move a story in their own publication and tell you things like this?
It has happened, but there are other ways to get the stuff out. You know, people talk in this town. These newsrooms, there's great frustration because the editors kill a lot of the good stuff and keep a lot of the hot stuff out of the copy.
Dayton, Ohio, home of James Cox. Go ahead, please.
I'm surprised that no one has picked up on Mr. Kinsley's earlier comment that the government should play a role in economics.
Got to, sir, hold on. Hold on, sir. Got to talk into the phone. We can't hear you. Pick up the phone, or I'm going to go to New York City next. Go ahead, please. You're on the air.
Yes, I wanted to address my question to Mr. Kinsley, whom I have been an admirer of for many years. I was a very big Clinton advocate. I was very excited when he got elected, snuck off last minute to the inauguration. However, at this point, after all of the scandal that's gone on, and I'm a close follower of politics, I really believe that it's not an extreme to say that I believe he is a sociopath. I think that he really does not have a conscience. At the time of the Monica scandal, there was no doubt in my mind that had the dress not been evidence, that they would have made her the stalker that they were beginning to make her. I think what he did with Lonnie Guinier was a disgrace. In terms of the House, I believe that it's financed, and I don't know how they justify that. I think there are, as we've all agreed, I think, said that, there are many people who would like to have such a deal. Last year I couldn't join my tennis club. If someone had offered to buy me a membership, I would have had to say no. I earn $100,000 a year with my husband, but I would have said, please give it to a charity.
Thanks, caller. Mr. Kinsley.
Well, I basically agree about the Monica thing. That was very disillusioning. I think sociopath goes a bit far. I agree about Lonnie Guinier. I don't think you condemn a whole administration for something like that. That's sort of a run-of-the-mill disappointment that we all face. And the House thing, we've been over. Everybody does it is no defense, but the fact is everybody does it.
Last call, Danbury, Connecticut, for Matt Drudge and Michael Kinsley. This is the Liberal Line. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Matt, this is for you especially. Are you aware of a book called Anatomy of a Scandal written by James Redder? It has on the cover here a little bit about it. It starts at the beginning and traces the connection between the various patriots, crackpots, politicians, and organized religious groups, chronicling their increasingly aggressive efforts to immobilize the Clinton administration. And I'd like to put everyone onto this book, because this I have found is a gold mine. I just caught this man at the end of a movie. I had watched a movie on Sunday night. I turned on to C-SPAN 2, just caught a little of it, the tail end, to get this book title, and I am just so happy. It's like a gold mine.
Thanks, caller.
C-SPAN 2 has made her happy.
We like to hear that. It's like Slate and DrudgeReport.com. Go ahead.
A book also coming out, Joe Conis and Gene Lyons, about behind the scenes and how there was a group trying to get Clinton. They probably used me, would be the theory. I don't know. To me, news is news is news. It doesn't really matter where it comes from. The New York Post this weekend broke a huge story on Sumner Redstone cheating on his wife, and it's a whole big stink there. Who planted that?
Mrs. Redstone's filed for divorce.
There is always, whenever a leak happens, whenever there's news, it always comes from competing interests. I would say the New York Times has really been a lapdog of the Justice Department. Every time I see a David Johnson byline, I know it's coming from Justice.
Last question to both of you. Which was the first president in history to come from the Senate to the presidency? Michael Kinsley.
Just a guess. Warren G. Harding.
What was the second man? There have only been two in history.
Directly from the Senate?
Senate to the United States presidency.
This must be an easy question.
It's very easy.
I've been invited to go on Jeopardy for the November sweep, so I better not go.
This is trouble. John F. Kennedy coming. Thank you.
Even Kinsley didn't know that one.
Michael Kinsley of Slate.com and Matt Drudge of MattDrudgeReport.com. Thank you both for being with us. Warren Harding next. Have a good week.